Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's Behind the Stripes webcast. This is Tribune sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune football beat writer Dave Matter. Missouri coming off a 17-6 season opening win over Miami, Ohio. Just your thoughts, first of all, I guess on the offense, which was a struggle. The previous quarterbacks to James Franklin had kind of spectacular debuts, not so much for James.
Yeah, he looked pretty good running the ball, but throwing the ball, just didn't look very comfortable back there. He was missing some wide open passes. His accuracy numbers weren't bad, but he just wasn't very efficient. It didn't seem like he was making terrible decisions with the ball, except for the one interception, but he was missing guys that were wide open, and we're sort of unaccustomed to seeing that from a Missouri quarterback, especially if you go back to Chase Daniel, where it was rare when he misfired on a pass. So, and Blaine Gabbert at times too. So, I think they're going to have to adjust. He has to get better. You expect that maybe they do have to lean on the running game a little bit more this year. That got a little bit harder on Monday, but just wasn't a very crisp performance by a passing game that we have gotten used to seeing be really effective.
He didn't go downfield much, or not effectively anyway. It was just very horizontal. He had a couple of chances. I thought he overthrew Michael Agnew where he was fairly open. It would have been a touchdown.
Yeah.
Overthrew him. And then also on the sideline to Agnew, which had potential for a big gainer, just kind of a bubble screen, but he was wide open and he overthrew him. So those two kind of stood out to me as the passes he missed, and then obviously the interception to Moe was right into double coverage, which I know TJ Moe is taking the blame for that one, but still it's not really a pass you want to make.
Right.
So yeah, that was a little disconcerting. I think if you were banking on him to just seamlessly step right in. I thought the offensive line / running backs didn't knock my socks off either, especially at the end of the game where your whole MO is just to run out the clock. The last 4 minutes, both times, they just couldn't get any. When Miami, Ohio knew they were running, Missouri couldn't get anywhere against them. So that was also, I think, probably a bit of a red flag.
Yeah, and a handful of penalties from the offensive line. You don't see that from some of those guys much. I mean, Dan Hoke, I don't think he's ever gotten a penalty at Missouri, and he had a really costly false start on I think 3rd and 5. The snaps weren't great from Jason Palmgren. Yeah, it's his first game snapping, but he's got to get better at that. So it just didn't look very crisp, from top to bottom.
Defensively, they did look good, and special teams. But to focus on defense, I thought really that when you look at it, the only score they gave up was when Miami, Ohio starts on Missouri's 14-yard line.
Right.
So that's pretty excusable. Who stood out to you that maybe you wouldn't have expected coming into it?
I thought the cornerbacks both played really well in their first career start. E.J. Gaines had that great interception when Miami was driving and they were in the red zone there. Trey Hopson, I thought, played really well. Neither of those guys got beat on anything badly. They were both physical tacklers. They came up with some big stops. So I thought that they played really well. You get Kip Edwards back this week, and now all of a sudden you're looking at pretty solid 1, 2, 3 lineup of cornerbacks there. So pretty good situation to have there. Braden Burnett came in late and got a sack. By that point the game was over, but that was a promising sign there for position now that loses some depth with Jacquez Smith out for at least 1 week with the dislocated elbow, and looks like Burnett's going to start there. So you're seeing some guys. They're playing a lot of guys. I mean, they played a lot of guys in the secondary, a lot of guys across the defensive line. So they're giving some people some opportunities to kind of make a name for themselves.
Andrew Wilson looked good. He's a guy that played a lot last year, filling in when all those guys are injured, but he looks like a frontline starter for them now. I liked him a lot. Dominic Hamilton kind of picked up where he left off before his injury last year. And just to talk a little bit more about Burnett, I think most of us probably thought when Jacquez got hurt that the starter maybe would be Coney Ely, the guy we really liked from the spring, but they named Burnett starter.
Yeah, they seem to just I hate this term because it's such a cliche, they like his motor. He never stops up there. I don't think they ever have a question about his effort. Pretty good pass rusher. He showed it there on the sack, and he kind of showed that all through camp. And beginning of preseason camp about a month ago, he was 4th or 5th on the depth chart. He just steadily made his way up there, and I think still all those guys will split reps pretty evenly. Throwing Michael Sam into the mix too with Ely, and Brad Madison will be the guy. I think he'll leave the field the least, but I think they'll mix things up with their defensive front this week too. Maybe show some things that they've been working on that they kind of saved for this second game of the week.
All right, they go to Arizona State on Friday. This is really a big game for Missouri. If you're looking at Missouri to be a 9-win team or 10-win team, this is the game you got to win, I would think. I think they're about a 7-point underdog. It's going to be a hot. The weather in Columbia is now about in the 70s, but it's going to be a hot night. Just your thoughts on what kind of matchup that is for Missouri?
We don't know a whole lot about Arizona State because they beat up on an FCS team, that a UC Davis team that they should have rolled over, and they did. But they bring back a lot of starters. They've had a lot of injuries like Missouri, mostly on their defense. They've got one of the best linebackers in the country, Vontez Burfict. He's an NFL guy in the middle who makes a lot of headlines for a lot of things he does. He can be kind of a chippy guy, very intense player. It'd be interesting to see how he matches up with Missouri against their passing game. He's a 250-pound big middle linebacker, so maybe they can get him matched up against some of those inside receivers. You don't know how fast he is, compared to a Mo or Agnew or some of their good athletes they have. So I think Missouri's offense has to play well because Arizona State has a spread attack, a pretty good quarterback that they like, got some weapons in the passing game and at running back. So I don't think you can win this game with just 17 points. That's no way, especially if you go on the road. They've been there before, but it was a neutral site. Bowl game last year at Sun Devil Stadium. Now it's a place that's obviously going to be really hot. Can't imagine it being much hotter than Missouri's game at home was last Saturday, but out there in the desert, and it can be a pretty rabid fan base at times. They're wearing their all-black new uniforms that Arizona State has, so I think they'll be up for it. And I think it's one of the best games in the entire week, but of the whole non-conference season in the Big 12, I think one of the more interesting matchups.
Yeah, I think it's going to come down to James Franklin's play in this game. I mean, going into a hostile environment, which he hasn't done before. Yeah. And we'll see. I think we both talked about going into the opener, the real test for him was going to be the second game. And so Here we are. Now, the thing that's overshadowed everything for about the last year and a half is conference realignment and where Missouri falls in it. Obviously, kind of a blockbuster on Friday when the Oklahoma president, David Boren, comes out and makes it seem pretty clear that they are looking elsewhere and would be not so unhappy to leave the Big 12 if the Big 12 can't really get its act together. Right. But by saying those things, it kind of makes it hard for the Big 12 to get its act together and attract any other team. So, A, do you think the Big 12 is dead? And B, if so, where would you guess Missouri might land?
Well, A, it seemed like Boren kind of crossed a line with his comments to where I don't know if the league can go back, or I don't know if Oklahoma can go back after the things he said. When you're specifically mentioning other conferences that you're having conversations with, and those things aren't really being denied, it just seems like the writing is definitely on the wall this time. It's just a matter of how many schools are going to leave for the Pac-12, where they fit in all of this. But if Oklahoma's gone, I think everyone realizes this thing is over in the Big 12. Where does Missouri go? Yeah, I do think they'll have some options, but a lot of it just depends on the other major conferences and what they want to do. I mean, it seems like nobody wants to light the fuse and blow everything up and be the one responsible for going to these mega super conferences if that's what happens. But if they do, I think Missouri easily lands somewhere pretty good. I think the fallback and the fear that maybe a lot of fans have is the Big East, because it's not a very appealing football conference. Will it be if you add a Missouri? They're adding TCU next year. If you add Kansas and Kansas State, well, I think it's better. It's a 12-team conference. It's a great basketball conference anyway, but it even gets better if you add a Missouri and Kansas State. But is the SEC is there a mutual interest between Missouri and the SEC? I don't think we know that. I think a lot of people assume that's true. But I don't know if we really know that there is.
On either end.
Yeah, on either end, absolutely. And the Big Ten, did Missouri miss out on its chance a year ago, and will that offer ever be extended? I don't think we don't know that. So, I think that would be Missouri's number one choice. I think that would be the fans' number one choice, and it would be the ideal choice. But will it be a choice? I don't know.
Yeah, I kind of agree that Big East is sort of the fallback plan. But the one thing you could say about the Big East is they are kind of next in line for TV contract renegotiation. I believe they do it in 2012. Right. And that could be a blockbuster when you consider the sites of the schools in the Big East, the media markets there. So that's one thing to consider if you have to decide how they were going to divide when you got that many schools. How are you going to divide it for football and basketball? Would it be more appealing to Missouri to be in a league like that where you have a chance to win it in football, or to go to the SEC, which is a better league, geographically makes more sense, but you're going to be busting your tail to finish 500 in the conference. So I guess it depends on just what you prefer as a fan or as a athletic director, as a school chancellor. I guess is really the one making the decision.
Not that the fans will have any say in this,
No.
but it'll be interesting to see how that shakes out.
And the other thing is that when you're talking about school presidents and chancellors making decisions, academics play some role at least in this, and the reputations of conferences as far as their academics could play a role too. So I guess we're in for another fun few months of twists and turns. Well, it's not so bad in the summer, but now during the season, it's just a little extra work we didn't really need. Anyway, we'll tune in next week when we review the Arizona State game and look forward to the clash with Western Illinois.